In the eerie quiet of June 19th, 2003, Margarita Levy, a 21-year-old woman from Ashdod, was discovered lifeless. She lay there, covered in blankets, her body marked by disturbing signs of violence. Hidden away in a park in the Yehilim neighborhood Eilat, in the southern part of Israel. Levy, who moved to Eilat, dreamed of enrolling into the Hebrew University of Jerusalem to become a nurse. Since she came from a middle-class family, she had to scrap every last bit of money to achieve her dream. With the hope of taking a part-time job as a waitress, she left her hometown after completing her military service in Ashdod. However, her life was tragically cut short, and she left without bidding the final goodbye. As the 2-decade-old murder case is finally getting a closure, we can't help but ask a few questions. Who was Margarita Levy? Why was justice not served to this pure soul for the past 20 years following her tragic death? Let us dive right in to find what happened on that fateful day. Nestled at the southern edge of Israel on the Red Sea is the resort city of Eilat. Tourists would flood into the city as it had enchanting beaches, clear waters, and a warm climate. It's a place where people typically feel secure strolling through the streets, even after nightfall, as the city rarely empties entirely. Consequently, Eilat has maintained a low crime rate. The crime rate in the city was always lower than the national average. The city is preferred by solo female travelers at night. However, such tranquility wasn't always the norm, especially in the early 2000s. 13 years prior to Levy's murder in 2003, Margarita Levy's mother, Olga Levy, had already endured loss. Her husband passed away in a car accident. Faced with the responsibility of caring for her children, she took a courageous leap, leaving the Soviet Union to start anew in Israel. A decade preceding the tragedy, the family had settled in Ashdod, where Margarita served in the Israeli Air Force, and her mother found employment in a cafe. Olga Levy believed that Eilat was a safe haven for her 21-year-old daughter to work. Olga, who was keen about her daughter's safety, connected with an old friend who was a figure familiar in Eilat's hotel scene. After getting an assurance about the safety, she sent her beloved daughter away. They always kept in touch, and Margarita would always update her mother about everything that went on that particular day. From a hostel on the first night to the Shalom Plaza Hotel for work the next day, Margarita was hired as a waitress. The hotel's policy, as explained by the owner, Shalom Ben Moshe, excluded worker residences. Margarita had to eventually settle in the apartment of an acquaintance after being told to start work shortly. As she was taking a step closer to her dream, she felt content and was in high spirits. On Wednesday, Margarita had a casual conversation with her mother and reassured her by saying, "What are you worried about?" And she mentioned a beach visit to blow off some stress. Nervous at work, her mother refrained from asking which beach. That call marked their last conversation. Returning from work that evening, Olga tried to connect with her daughter on a call. She couldn't get in touch for hours, which made her feel uneasy. The next day, Olga reached out to a friend in Eilat who offered reassurance. Such are the young people. Margarita was supposed to check in for work at 5 p.m. However, she was nowhere to be seen. Olga anxiously reached out to the Eilat police seeking help. She called every 2 hours, desperate to find her daughter. Around 1 a.m. in the morning, the police returned the call, but they had somber news. A lifeless body had been found at a park in Eilat. Accompanied by her boyfriend, broken-hearted Olga went to Eilat. Olga's boyfriend believed that there was still hope, but the mother knew the truth. Margarita's lifeless form lay in a pool of blood, bearing the brutal imprints of violence. discovered in the public park of the Yehilim neighborhood. A crimson mini dress and swimsuit adorned her during her time in Eilat, as evidenced by circulated photographs, possibly present at the time of her tragic demise. From the initial examination, the police concluded that the park wasn't the crime scene, as the vigilant neighbors would have heard any sort of noises and responded. Margarita's body was in rough shape, with her laying face down on her stomach and having minimal clothing. The police got wind of this distressing find and rushed to the park to examine the young woman's body. Covered with blankets and a towel over her head, she had suffered severe injuries to her head, face, and upper limbs, along with a stab wound in the chest. A special investigation team was formed to look into Margarita's murder. In the beginning, figuring out what really happened proved challenging for the investigators. The police struggled to find leads and sought the public's help to gather details that could help solve the case. After 2 weeks, there was a slight breakthrough. They finally had a lead. They reached out to Sergei Agranov, a discharged soldier who knew Margarita. Sergei, who used to work as a salesman in a pizza shop in Eilat, cooperated with the police. He stated that he knew Margarita, but denied any involvement in her murder. After his testimony, he was questioned under warning and arrested. Police even searched his home, but nothing linking Sergei to Margarita's murder was found. During a formal court hearing on Sergei's involvement, his lawyer argued that although he knew Margarita, he had a solid alibi, confirming he was in his apartment with his roommates during the hours the murder occurred. However, the police countered this in court, suggesting that the park where Margarita's body was found was not the murder scene. They suspected she was killed elsewhere, and the killer later moved her body to the park. The suspicion was based on the proximity of Sergei's residence to the park, making it a convenient place to dispose of the body. The judge, considering reasonable doubt, extended Sergei's detention. However, 2 weeks later, he was released due to a lack of additional evidence to strengthen the suspicions against him. With Sergei now free, the detectives faced a dead end, and the case eventually went cold. Despite the passing of years, the investigators remained dedicated to finding Margarita's killer. They continued to make repeated attempts to obtain a DNA profile from items found near Margarita's body at the crime scene, keeping the murder case open and unresolved. Over 2 decades later, with advancements in DNA technology, the forensic lab at the Israel Police National Headquarters kept a close eye on findings from unresolved cases. A few months later, a re-examination of Margarita's case revealed a crucial breakthrough: a DNA profile leading to a potential suspect, Sami Abdu al-Assal, a 51-year-old from Jaffa. Back in 2003, when Margarita was murdered, Sami Abdu was 31, a father of 5 living in Aut, and worked at a local bar. The Eilat District Police, handling the case discreetly, intensified their efforts. Detectives started gathering evidence against Sami Abu to establish his involvement in Margarita's murder. A 10-month undercover investigation uncovered a chilling detail. In July 2003, about a month and a half after Margarita's murder, Sami Abu assaulted another woman in Aut, leading to his arrest and a 13-year prison sentence. His DNA was then entered into the system. Cross-checking Sami Abu's DNA with the sample found on Margarita Levy's body yielded a perfect match. Now age 51, Sami Abu al-Assal was arrested on May 14, 2023, facing charges of premeditated murder, aggravated murder, and sodomy. The investigation unveiled a grim sequence of events. Sami Abu had abducted Margarita, assaulting her in an isolated spot. Attempting to ensure her demise, he tried to strangle her, inflicted blows to her face and upper limbs, and finally stabbed her in the chest. In a sinister act, Abu al-Assal wrapped Margarita's head in a towel, covered her body in blankets, securing them with electric cables, and tightening the bindings. He callously disposed of her in the meadow of a neighborhood park before fleeing the scene. The original suspect, Sergei Agranov, was detained once again for about 2 weeks as the police explored a potential connection between him and Sami Abu al-Assal. Finding no link, it became evident that Sami Abu had acted alone in this horrendous act. The news of a breakthrough in Margarita's case reached her family, and Olga Levy, Margarita's mother, shared her emotions about the developments. Olga expressed a mix of joy and sadness upon learning that Margarita's killer, Sami Abu, had been identified. While she found solace in the fact that the perpetrator would finally face justice, Olga admitted to conflicting feelings. The prospect of confronting the man who took her daughter's life stirred up the haunting memories of that tragic day. Struggling to move forward, Olga grappled with the decision of whether she could endure the trial proceedings. The thought of facing Sami Abu and reliving the horrors of Margarita's murder weighed heavily on her. Despite the closure brought by the breakthrough, Olga was determined to focus on rebuilding her life and leaving the past horrors behind. Expressing her gratitude, Olga extended thanks to the police department for their unwavering dedication throughout the 20 years, from 2003 to the present. Her only hope now was that Sami Abu would receive the deserved punishment for the crimes he committed.
It took that much time to get people to finally come forward, get it off their chest, and tell us what we needed to know.
Back on June 25, 2006, Guadalupe Vela, just 20 years old, was discovered lifeless in the backyard, blood staining the scene. The cops had little to go on, with just 9mm bullet casings scattered on the road. There was someone who might have seen it all, a potential witness, but they chose silence over cooperation. Living as a gang member in a shady neighborhood in Bradenton, Florida, Vela's life was already filled with rough encounters. Despite this, he would still have his days of peace drinking with his friends at a bar. This was what was supposed to happen on the night of June 25th. However, fate took a dark turn when he was gunned down in cold blood. Who was the gunman? Why was Vela killed? And how was the case solved after 16 long years? Let's dive in to find out what led to the breakthrough after all these years that came from a rather unexpected place. In Bradenton, under the Florida sun and by the Gulf Coast, life seems like a breeze. With its sandy beaches and lively festivals, it's a town that welcomes you with open arms. Tucked into Manatee County and part of the Sarasota metropolitan area, Bradenton is known as the Friendly City for a reason and has a population of 56,730 people as of 2023. People say it's a good place to call home, especially if you're raising a family. Safety is part of the package. Bradenton is a relatively secure city. The numbers say the town's crime rate hovers around 22.23 incidents per 1,000 residents each year, a bit below what you might find in your average U.S. city. It's a mystery how a town so inviting manages to keep things on the safer side, but the numbers don't lie. However, this sense of safety didn't prove useful when Vela met his unfortunate end. On that summer evening in 2006, Vela visited the Santa Fe Bar and Grill in Bradenton seeking a good time with food and warmth in the air. However, things took a turn when he clashed with Garcia, a known member of the East Side Crip gang. The argument lingered outside the bar, and they eventually went their separate ways, unaware that this dispute would pave the way for tragedy. Later, seeking solace, Vela went to a relative's house on 33rd Avenue East. Little did he anticipate that he would cross paths with Garcia again. Garcia was looking to reignite the argument, as his ego was hurt earlier. It took a dark turn as night settled in. In the shadows, the dispute escalated to gunfire. Garcia, fueled by anger, fired 2 shots into Vela's back as he tried to escape. Nearby, police were alerted by the sounds of gunshots, but by the time they arrived, Vela was already dead with no sight of the gunman. All that was left were a few 9mm bullet casings on the ground. Though the murder wasn't premeditated, Garcia had a way of hiding his steps. Despite having a reliable witness, fear held them back from speaking against him. This silence left the police without any leads to trace the killer. In October of 2006, sheriff's detectives had a breakthrough when they pulled Garcia over for a routine traffic issue. What caught their attention was a 9mm pistol discovered in Garcia's car. This led to his arrest for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Ballistics testing connected the gun to the crime scene, but it wasn't the one that had fired the fatal shots at Vela. Not having enough evidence against Garcia, the case turned cold, despite the strong suspicion on the suspect. Over the years, investigators heard from witnesses who claimed Garcia openly spoke about killing Vela. Then, in the summer of 2022, 16 long years later, a crucial revelation came to light. Another inmate at the Manatee County Jail disclosed that Garcia had confessed to killing Vela, providing chilling specifics about that fateful night. Adding to the puzzle, detectives uncovered a similar confession from Garcia during his time at the Manatee County Jail in 2015. He confided details about the night of the crime and the scene itself. The plot thickened when a prisoner at the Wakulla Correctional Institute stepped forward in July of 2021, claiming to have witnessed Garcia shoot Vela. More than 16 years after Vela's death, the pieces fell into place. Homicide detectives from the Manatee Sheriff's Office apprehended Garcia on the 800 block of 30th Avenue West in Bradenton. It was a startling development, especially considering Garcia was already out on bond for an unrelated homicide back in 2014. Garcia is facing second-degree murder charges for the death of Samuel Spanky Campos Conde. Detectives learned that Conde was killed in a gang-related shooting on December 20, 2014, at 3704 9th Street in Bradenton. The case remained unsolved for years due to the witnesses staying silent about who shot Conde. The place where Conde's body was found was a known spot for illegal beer sales after other bars had closed down. Witnesses later revealed to detectives that on the day Conde died, an argument between rival gang members escalated, resulting in an unknown person shooting and killing him. Given the circumstances of this second crime having the same beats as Vela's case, investigators now suspected that Garcia was the unknown person. Currently serving time in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for firearm convictions unrelated to Conde's death, Garcia seems to have a violent history. After Conde's death, his older brother, Gabriel, also fell victim to a gang-related shooting in 2018. Although the 2 incidents were unrelated, the police managed to identify and apprehend the culprits later. These events point to Garcia as a cold-blooded killer who has taken multiple lives. The police are urging the public to come forward with any information about Garcia's involvement in criminal activities. The shadows surrounding his past actions run deep, and law enforcement seeks the community's help in uncovering the truth.
40 years ago, the skeletal remains of two young women. They were found hidden behind a log in Clark County. Only one of the victims, though, was ever identified.
But now cold case detectives are trying to figure out if a teen who disappeared from Portland way back in 1974 could be that second victim.
Half a century ago, on October 12, 1974, something chilling went down. Out in Dole Valley, near Vancouver, eastern Clark County in Washington, they stumbled upon the grim scene of two women. The authorities were summoned to examine the scene where the bodies had been left laying on the ground, exposed to the elements. One was known, Carol Platt Valenzuela, but the other one, she stayed as a puzzle for more than 4 decades. It turns out, after all those years, the mystery girl was 17-year-old Martha Marie Morrison.
In my gut, in my heart, I've known that Martha was not still alive.
What had happened that resulted in the bodies of two women being left out in the valley? Could the police crack the case? And was there any connection between Martha and Valenzuela? Let's jump right in and uncover the truth. Vancouver sits on the north bank of the Columbia River in the U.S. state of Washington, specifically in Clark County. Blessed with scenic views, it's often dubbed the Hollywood of the North. Despite its reputation for safety, with most neighborhoods reporting minimal violent crime, it's important to note that Vancouver, like any place, isn't entirely free of danger. And the danger that surrounded the area was intense back in the 70s. Martha Murray Morrison was born around 1956 in Eugene, Oregon. She shared her childhood with her sister Reba. Their close bond was strengthened by their mother's deafness, leading Martha to dedicate hours to mastering sign language, aiming to ease her mother's life. During much of her early years, Martha found herself in foster care, residing in Lane County, Oregon, near Eugene. She attended Roosevelt High School in Portland, and later the Corvallis Farm School in Corvallis. Martha, however, carried a history of drug use and repeatedly running away from both her biological and foster families, including the Corvallis Farm School. Later, she headed to Arizona for a job program, where she encountered the one person who would become the love of her life. They later moved to Portland in mid-1974, where he worked as a welder in the shipyards. Shortly before her disappearance on September 1, 1974, Morrison had visited her family in Eugene with the man by her side. On October 12, 1974, the remains of two women were discovered in Dole Valley near Vancouver, in eastern Clark County in Washington. The bodies of the two women were left exposed to the elements, with no other clues. After the discovery, a nationwide examination of the victims' bones took place in the hope of identifying them. One victim was swiftly identified through dental records as 18-year-old Carol Platt Valenzuela. However, the second victim's identity remained unknown at the time. Valenzuela had been reported missing on August 4, 1974 by her husband when she failed to return home after hitchhiking to Vancouver on August 2nd. Investigators hoped that identifying Valenzuela might lead to the identification of the unidentified Morrison. They intended to question Valenzuela's husband after her identification, but he was recovering from an aspirin overdose at the time. Despite his arrest, he was eventually released after passing a polygraph test on October 2nd. All efforts to identify the second victim were unsuccessful. Initially estimated to be 20 to 25 years old, the remains were examined by an anthropologist from the University of Washington. Forensic facial reconstructions, including both frontal and profile views, were created and released through a newspaper, but they went unrecognized by the public. Following the initial discovery, the police revisited the scene to potentially gather more evidence. A borrowed metal detector from a resident in Snohomish County was employed in this effort. The examination revealed that the victims had been deceased for at least 2 weeks before their discovery. Decomposition and animal activity complicated efforts to estimate the time and cause of death, though authorities presumed that they were murdered. There was also a possibility that the remains were deposited at the location at different times. During the investigation, several missing persons were considered, including Patty Hearst, who was later found alive. Investigator Nikki Coster mentioned in an interview after the identification that a significant amount of time had been dedicated to the case, including exploring leads that could link it to serial killer Gary Ridgway. Ted Bundy and Randall Woodfield were both listed as persons of interest in both Morrison's and Valenzuela's cases before 2017, when Warren Leslie Forrest was identified as the prime suspect.
Also continued to look at Warren Leslie Forrest, who's currently in prison for another murder and suspected in several others.
Despite Morrison initially being ruled out as a missing person, there was speculation about her being the possible identity of a female homicide victim named Orange Socks, estimated to be between 15 and 30 when found in Texas in 1979. In August 2019, this latter victim was identified as Deborah Jackson. DNA clues unfolded as investigators reached out to Martha Morrison's sister and half-brother, drawing a genetic map for potential matches. It was sent to Bobby Selmark Forensics in Lorton, Virginia, for analysis. After the tests were done, they compared the genetic code to the unidentified remains, whose DNA fingerprint had been crafted in 2012. While similarities emerged, a rock-solid match remained elusive. The Clark County medical examiners faced a mystery, needing more family DNA from Reba to crack the case. They sought a sample from Martha's mother, running tests that, while showing consistent DNA, remained elusive for the unidentified woman. Both Morrison and the mystery victim were logged into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, a hub for tracing the lost and putting names to the nameless. 10 possibilities were ruled out until the big break arrived in July of 2015. Morrison's skull and other bones, mistakenly labeled as Carol Platt Valenzuela's during storage, added layers to the mystery, keeping them unidentified for an extended period. Investigator Nikki Coster pointed to this mix-up as one reason behind the prolonged puzzle. In 2011, a snag in the plan emerged when the skull's teeth stood out as different from Valenzuela's dental records. After earlier attempts fell short, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children stepped in, offering to fund a dig to retrieve the victim's father's DNA for comparison. The final test in this saga left no room for doubt. The remains unequivocally belonged to Martha Morrison, with a staggering probability of 99%. As detectives combed through evidence, they cast a wide net over suspected serial killers, hoping to untangle the web around Martha and Carol's murders. In 2017, a breakthrough emerged when a DNA sample from an unidentified woman was discovered on the grip of a serial killer's air pistol. To their astonishment, this DNA matched Martha Morrison's perfectly. A forensic scientist from the Washington State Patrol Lab in Vancouver confirmed the match, testifying that the partial DNA profile from the weapon aligned precisely with Martha's remains. The odds of this match were staggering, with a probability of 1 in 30 billion. The serial killer behind the weapon, Warren Leslie Forrest, was already serving a life sentence for the 1974 murder of 20-year-old Krista Blake. The discovery marked a crucial turning point in the investigation, connecting Martha to Forrest's criminal history. On October 2, 1974, a mere 10 days before Martha and Carol's bodies were discovered in Dole Valley, investigators delved deeper into Warren Leslie Forrest's past to uncover additional evidence. When Forrest was finally confronted with the allegations, he vehemently denied involvement in the murders of Martha and Carol. However, the case took a significant turn when a forensic scientist from the Washington State Patrol Lab in Vancouver testified. She revealed that the partial DNA profile extracted from the weapon matched the partial DNA profile from Martha's remains. Armed with this compelling evidence, Forrest was charged with Martha Morrison's murder. In 2019, prosecutors, bolstered by the new DNA findings, filed a fresh murder conviction against Forrest, even though he was already serving a sentence for other homicides. The legal proceedings aimed to ensure that Forrest faced consequences for Martha's murder. Forrest's trial unfolded in January of 2023, drawing over 30 witnesses to testify against him. Among them were family members of Forrest's other victims, including 16-year-old Jamie Grissom, 14-year-old Diane Gilchrist, and 6 other girls and women suspected to have fallen victims to Forrest's actions. Prosecutors aimed to showcase the now 74-year-old Forrest's established pattern of abducting, abusing, and leaving women dead in the early 1970s. One key witness, Norma Jean Lewis, took the stand to provide her account. Norma, another survivor of Forrest's assaults, was only 15 when she faced abduction and assault in the same year Martha Morrison went missing. Norma vividly described her encounter with Forrest during the trial. Approaching her after work, Forrest persuaded Norma to join him for a modeling gig. Trusting his convincing demeanor, Norma agreed and entered Forrest's blue van. He then drove her to Washington Park in Portland, where he allegedly attacked her with a knife, attempting to strangle her, bound her in his trunk, and shot her multiple times with an air pistol, the same item used as evidence in Martha's case. Yet in the legal arena, Sean Downs, the advocate for Forrest, stood firm, asserting that the state stumbled in fulfilling its burden of proof. The absence of evidence outlining the time, place, and manner of Morrison's demise, along with the elusive date of her disappearance, formed the crux of his argument. He also added that Martha's remains were discovered in a distinct location, diverging from the sites where Forrest's other victims were found, and where Norma was rescued. Notably, Martha's crime scene lacked the association with Clark County Parks, where Forrest had worked in a department. During closing arguments, Clark County prosecutor Lauren Boyd emphasized that despite these variations, the DNA evidence, coupled with Forrest's established pattern of abducting and leaving women for dead in rural Clark County in 1974, provided conclusive proof that he had executed a plan to kill Martha. Norma recounted how Forrest led her out of the car with a noose around her neck, strangled her to unconsciousness, covered her with logs, and left her for dead in 1974. Her testimony added a compelling layer to the trial, providing insight into Forrest's brutal killings. On February 1, 2023, a Southwest Washington jury found suspected serial killer Warren Leslie Forrest guilty of first-degree murder in Martha Morrison's cold case. On February 17, 2023, he was rightfully handed another life sentence for the heinous crime committed back in 1974. The unanimous decision brought immediate relief and emotion to the families of Warren's known victims. Martha's half-brother, Michael Morrison, acknowledged that there was still work to be done for Warren's other suspected victims.
I was watching my mom, because my mom never gave up hope.
For him, it extended beyond his sister's murder, encompassing the challenges that families had endured for years. Forrest remains the prime suspect in at least 5 other homicide cases, and detectives are determined to link him to those crimes, ensuring justice for all affected families. As we conclude our exploration of these 3 bone-chilling cases, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think DNA technology can help the system to solve many such cold cases? Share your views in the comments below. And if you have a case you want us to cover, please let us know. For more captivating true crime stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to let us know which case you'd like us to cover next. Stay tuned for more intriguing tales. Until next time, stay safe.
This investigation revolved around the December 1983 murder of a U.S. Navy member by the name of Sonny Grotton.
My dad, Sonny Grotton, was the greatest dad in the world. He really was.
Eyes on the deck, let's move it out.
Sonny Grotton, a U.S. Navy member, was murdered outside his house in Belfast, Maine.
December 16, 1983 is a day marked by a horrific and twisted tragedy that shocked the entire city of Belfast, Maine. That fateful Friday, a well-known U.S. Navy officer, Sonny Grotton, had just arrived at his home, located on 12 White Street, to spend his weekend there. Officer Grotton looked forward to reuniting with his wife Norma, who was waiting for him inside. But before he could reach the door, he was shot 3 times.
There was somebody hiding by the woodpile that was piled in the driveway. And for some reason, they shot my dad.
This mysterious assassination would lead the authorities of Maine on a decade-long investigation that ultimately proved fruitless. However, nearly 17 years after the crime, 2 NCIS agents named Jeff Morrow and David Truesdale swore to answer one burning question: who assassinated Officer Sonny Grotton? About 18 miles north of Rock Island, located right at the mouth of the Passagassawakeg River, is a beautiful and historic city called Belfast. This little mid-coast city lies in the state of Maine, and it is littered with historic buildings and scenic waterways. Often said to be the best city to live in Maine, this shipbuilding city has a population of just over 6,000 people. The residents are a tight-knit community that treats both locals and newcomers with kindness and hospitality. Since the city's inception in 1850, many citizens have chosen the charming and safe city of Belfast to be their home. And in the early 90s, one of the many residents was a man named Mr. Melvin Sonny Grotton. Melvin Sonny Grotton Jr. was born on November 15, 1937, to parents Mervyn LaForest and Margaret Hamilton Grotton. Sonny was an only child, and he was raised by both his parents in Belfast, Waldo County, Maine. Many of the Belfast residents who knew Sonny from his childhood to his adolescent years all said the same things about him. He was a kind-hearted, hard-working, and loving person who was always ready to lend a helping hand. He was also known to have a geeky side, as he loved gadgets. Sonny was a very intelligent guy, but he dropped out of high school during his teenage years. At the time, Sonny had fallen head over heels for a girl, and her name was Norma Small. They were an odd couple, as Norma was a very different person from Sonny. But that didn't matter to them. They loved each other, and it wasn't long before they got married. A little after their wedding, the couple welcomed their first child. It was a baby boy, and they named him Russell L. Grotton. He was born in 1954. They had another child 3 years after that, a baby girl named Betty Ann Grotton, and she was born on September 29, 1957. Their third and last child at the time was a boy named Mervyn III. During the first few years of their marriage, things weren't easy for the couple. They got married early, and both Sonny and Norma were trying everything they could to juggle both their marriage and family lives. It got worse from there, as on May 27, 1959, things took a horrific turn. A massive fire broke out in the couple's home that Tuesday morning. Sonny and Norma were able to escape with their lives, but unfortunately, all 3 children died in the fire. At the time of their deaths, Russell was 4, Betty Ann was 1, and Mervyn III was only 7 months old. The children's funeral was on May 30th, 1959 at the Combs Funeral Home. They were laid to rest at 2 p.m. that Friday afternoon in the Grove Cemetery in Belfast, Maine. The pain and grief that followed after the death of all 3 children was unimaginable. The tragedy was a huge blow for the pair, but amidst all the pain and sorrow, Sonny didn't let it destroy him. He was determined to get him and his wife through the tragedy, and he wasn't going to let the overwhelming loss stop him. Even though he was a high school dropout, he worked extremely hard to build a career in the military. Sonny eventually joined the Navy, and everyone who met him during his time of service admired and respected Sonny. Most of his fellow Navy officers described him as a man of many morals who strongly believed in the American dream. Despite the tragedy he had suffered, Sonny had managed to single-handedly get himself and his wife back on their feet. With a stable career, Sonny and Norma decided to have kids again. A little while after that, the couple had a girl that they named Rosalind, and in the years that followed, Norma gave birth to 2 other children, a boy named Michael and a girl named Nina. It was a hard task, but Sonny had managed to rebuild his life and his family. For the next 20 years, Sonny would go on to raise his 3 kids and have a long and fruitful career in the Navy. During the early 1980s, Sonny, who was still working as an enlisted naval serviceman, was sent to the Naval Education Training Center base in Newport, Rhode Island. He was assigned as a machinist-mate instructor to help train new naval officers on surface warfare-type skills and shipboard equipment. After he enlisted at the Newport base, Sonny worked and lived in Newport, Rhode Island during the weekdays, and after his working hours were over on Friday, he would go back to his family home in Belfast to spend his weekends. This became Sonny's new routine, as the arrangements allowed him to both work and spend time with his family. December 16, 1983 was a day like any other for Officer Sonny Grotton. He had trained the new naval officers at the Naval Education Training Center that Friday morning, and once the evening came around, he made his usual commute to his home in Belfast. This was Officer Sonny's favorite time of the week, as he enjoyed coming home to spend some time with his wife and kids. After a few hours of driving, Sonny finally pulled up in his driveway around 7:30 p.m. He checked his pocket to make sure his pay was still there before getting out of his pickup truck. His daughter Rosalind wasn't home at the time, but he knew both Norma and his son Michael were waiting for him inside. He made his way down the driveway with a smile on his face, as he couldn't wait to hug them. But unfortunately, Sonny never made it to the door alive. On December 16, 1983, Norma Small was sitting in her home playing cards with a friend while talking on the phone with her daughter Rosalind. Her son Michael was in his bedroom with a friend, and he was playing a guitar. At around 7:33 p.m., Norma and her friend heard a truck pull up in the driveway, and a few minutes later, 3 loud banging noises were heard coming from outside the house. Rosalind, who was on the phone with her mother, also heard the loud noises and thought it was the truck backfiring in the background. So she asked her mother if her dad was home and what the noise was. She also asked if something was wrong with her father's truck to make it backfire like that. But she never got an answer, as her mother told her she had to go before cutting the call.
It sounded like a car or a truck backfiring in the background. And I asked her, I said, what was that? Is Dad home now? Something wrong with the truck? Backfiring or something like that? And she's, oh, I gotta go. So she hung up really quick. And it wasn't very long after that, my grandmother called me, hysterical on the phone. And she said, Rosie, you've got to come over. Your dad's been shot. And I'm like, oh my God.
Norma then rushed outside to see the origin of the sound. But she found her 46-year-old husband lying in a pool of blood in the driveway. The scene was gruesome, as a part of his face had been blown off, and he was bleeding to death in front of his own home. It was exactly 8:45 p.m. when Officer Mark Nickerson, a trooper with the Maine State Police, received a call from a home located on 12 White Street in Belfast, telling him that Naval Officer Sonny Grotton had just been shot. After the call, Officer Nickerson rushed to the scene with a few other officers. They arrived at the scene a few minutes before 9 p.m. The emergency medical technicians on site moved quickly as they transported Sonny Grotton to the Waldo County Hospital. But the officers on the scene already knew it was too late. Officer Mervyn Sonny Grotton was pronounced dead later that evening, and the officers secured the location as it was now a homicide crime scene. Once the authorities had secured the crime scene, they began to look for any physical evidence the killer might have left behind. It didn't take the detectives long to find two .30-30 rifle casings. These casings were discovered in the family's backyard between two wood piles. The detectives found them about 30 to 40 feet from where Sonny's body was found. After the casings were stored away as evidence, the detectives continued to scour the entire place to see if they could find anything else that could lead them to the killer. But after all their efforts, no other physical evidence was found at the crime scene that evening. The initial theory most of the officers had on the scene was that this might have been a robbery. But the detectives knew there was something more to this. For starters, Officer Sonny had just been paid before coming home. He had over $900 on him, and shockingly, not $1 was taken. That alone proved that this wasn't a random robbery, but a premeditated execution. The detectives knew Sonny had died from 3 gunshot wounds. 2 bullets hit him in the torso region, and 1 hit him in the face. But they were still waiting on the autopsy reports to shed more light on his death. Sonny's post-mortem examination was performed the very next day, and it revealed that the first bullet hit him in the left hip. The second bullet tore through his left upper arm, passed through his torso, and came out his back. After the second shot, Sonny fell to the floor, and the third and final shot was made when the killer loomed over him. It wasn't officially confirmed, but it seemed likely he begged for his life at that point. But his pleas fell on deaf ears as the killer stood over Sonny and blew off the lower part of his face with the rifle. It was a horrific murder that shook the entire city of Belfast. Homicides were a pretty rare occurrence in the city, and all the residents were on edge. The detectives had already done all the necessary preparations to start the investigation. The victim, Mervyn Sonny Grotton, was already well known in the community as an honest, kind-hearted, and helpful person. So his murder baffled the local authorities as they wondered who would want to assassinate Sonny Grotton. However, some detectives already had a suspect on their minds. Detectives often say there's an unspoken rule in cases like this. Whenever there's a partner murder, the first suspect is always the spouse. There were already a lot of rumors surrounding Norma Small, and the detectives thought that would be the perfect place to start their investigation. Once the investigation into Norma Small began, the first thing detectives found out was that there was a lot of truth in the rumors about Norma. They had received information that while Sonny was away at the Naval Education Training Center base in Newport, Rhode Island, Norma abused the freedom from her husband and lived a very different life than the one Sonny might have known. There was evidence of numerous extramarital affairs, selling of hard substances, and substance abuse. Further investigations also showed that while Sonny didn't know about Norma's drug habits, he might have suspected or found out about a few of her many infidelities. There had apparently been an escalated incident in November where Sonny said that he had enough and he couldn't do it anymore. But at the end of it all, he couldn't bring himself to leave the mother of his children and his wife of 26 years. He was the kind of man who thought everything could be fixed, even his marriage. So he decided to put in the effort to save their marriage. But Sonny was unfortunately killed the following month, before he could even get a chance to repair his marriage. As the investigation went on, more disturbing information came to light as an unnamed friend of Norma, who was at the couple's home when Sonny was about to leave for Newport, Rhode Island, told the detectives what she had witnessed. She had seen Sonny kiss his wife goodbye before leaving, and she heard Norma utter the words, "That'll be the last time that he does that to me." As the detectives dug deeper into Norma, the worse it got. She had apparently told witnesses that she hated when Sonny came home for the weekends, and that she was pretty happy every time he left for the week. Additional investigations also revealed that Sonny was getting ready to retire from the Navy, and he had made plans to permanently move back home to Maine. This could have been another reason why his murder happened around that time. The detectives then reached out to even more friends to see what she might have said over the years, and they uncovered a lot more. Norma's statements had grown even more disturbing from there, as she had also told friends and witnesses that due to some insurance money, Sonny would be worth a lot more to her dead than alive. This led the detectives to believe that the motive for all this was money. To prove this theory, they carried out a few investigations into Norma's finances, and it showed that she would receive and be the sole owner of the real estate she co-owned with Sonny. In addition to that, she would also receive her husband's death benefit from the Navy. At this point in the investigation, everything pointed to Norma being the culprit. But as suspicious as all of their findings were, none of it was hard evidence that could be used in court. So the detectives carried out many interviews with Norma, trying to get her to slip up or reveal something. But Norma didn't give them anything. During one of the interviews where they were trying to find out more, the detectives asked Norma if she would take a polygraph test, but she declined. This fueled the detectives' suspicions even more, as Norma's refusal to take the polygraph test proved she was hiding something. The detectives knew Norma had hired a hitman to do the deed, but all the efforts to identify the assassin were unsuccessful. It seemed like the gunman was a ghost, as there were no traces of him apart from the bullet casings. The investigation was going south now, as with no confession from Norma and the identity of the hitman still unknown, the detectives didn't know where to go from there. Even though things had started to look bleak, the detectives did have a potential suspect for the hitman, as there was only one man in Belfast capable of committing such an atrocity, and his name was Joel Fuller. Fuller was a notorious outlaw, who the authorities described as the personification of evil. He was a cunning, smart, and heartless man with no scruples, and the word around town was that he would do anything for money. The detectives made numerous attempts to interrogate him and see if he knew or had anything to do with Sonny's murder. But even after all their efforts, they got nothing from Fuller. After their efforts to question Fuller had failed, the detectives continued to push forward with Norma to see if she might break. She had been interviewed over 11 times at that point, but she never gave them anything they could use to incriminate her. It seemed like the case was slowly going cold now, but the detectives didn't want to give up. Further efforts were made to put Fuller at the crime scene, but all of them were to no avail. The case kept growing colder with every passing day. The detectives were already at a dead end now, and there was still no substantial evidence against Norma or Fuller. After multiple failed investigations were carried out by the detectives, it wasn't long before the case went cold. Sadly, the file for the homicide case was eventually shelved, and the questions surrounding the murder of Officer Sonny Grotton were left unanswered. 17 long years had passed since the death of Officer Sonny Grotton, and while his homicide case had gone cold, his murder had not been forgotten. Even after all these years, his case was still on the minds of the two special agents at the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. One of these agents was a man named Mr. Jeff Morrow. Ever since he had heard about it, Agent Morrow had always felt he could crack the case if it was ever reopened. The other agent was an undercover specialist called Mr. Dave Truesdale. Agent Truesdale was also itching to solve the case. One of the reasons for this was because Agent Truesdale grew up in a military family, and he once stated that whenever he saw a military member hurt or killed by someone, it always pushed him to resolve the incident. It wasn't long before the two agents got together to share their ideas and theories for a new investigation, and after nearly 2 decades, the homicide case for Officer Mervyn Sonny Grotton was finally reopened. This time, the investigation was carried out by both the NCIS and the Maine State Police. With the detectives from the MSP and the agents from the NCIS now working together, things moved much faster, and it wasn't long before Special Agent Morrow had a lead, and that lead was a man named Larry Phillips. Mr. Phillips had come forward with a confession that could possibly reveal the identity of the gunman. The new information put smiles on both the detectives' and agents' faces, as it could potentially put a face to the supposed ghost that killed Sonny Grotton. Mr. Phillips met with the investigators soon after that, and he told them a fascinating tale. It was a conversation he had had with a friend about 16 years ago, while they were on a road trip across Maine's backcountry. He and his friend had been talking about guns, and a few minutes into the conversation, his friend brought up a .30-30 rifle and asked Phillips if he wanted it. Intrigued, Phillips asked about the rifle, and his friend's response horrified him. Phillips' friend had started bragging about using the rifle to murder a naval officer at the request of his wife. His friend didn't say any names, but he did tell Phillips how he hid behind a woodpile, waiting for the husband to come home before shooting him in the back. To prove he was telling the truth, his friend proceeded to show him the creek where he had thrown the weapon, but when Phillips tried to get it, his friend stopped him, telling him that the rifle's barrel was bent and that it was only good for shooting around corners, so he shouldn't bother. The agents who had been listening carefully then asked Larry Phillips what his friend's name was, and Mr. Phillips told them the man's name was Joel Fuller. The investigation had reached a full circle now, as even after all these years, it still came back to Joel Fuller and Norma Small. The agents knew that the many suspicions of the detectives that carried out the initial investigation were spot on. However, they couldn't take what Larry Phillips said at face value, as there was still the possibility that he could have been the killer himself, and all this was to put the blame on Fuller. So the detectives made him take a polygraph test, and he passed. Additional investigations also revealed that the rifle Phillips had told them about had already been found. It was found in May of 1985, just 2 years after the murder of Sonny Grotton. and the detectives at the time believed it was the murder weapon. The gun was a lever-action .30-30 caliber Winchester rifle, and the state police sent the rifle to a firearms and tool mark examiner to examine the casings found at the crime scene. But even after extensive tests, the firearms examiner couldn't prove it was the same weapon used to kill Sonny. Even without a solid murder weapon that could be used as evidence, Phillips' confession had given the detectives hope, because all they needed now to issue an arrest warrant was a confession from either Norma or Fuller. Talking to Fuller was easy because at the time of the reopened investigation, Fuller was already serving multiple life sentences for killing 2 drug dealers. During the case of the double homicide, Fuller was found guilty in court, and he was sent to prison just 2 years after Sonny's death. The detectives quickly made their way to the penitentiary as they tried to question him once again. But even after 17 years, Fuller didn't talk. Their next option was to question Norma, but they knew they couldn't get her to talk using the conventional way. They had learned from the mistakes of the initial detectives who had frequently questioned Norma numerous times to get her to talk. So this time, they decided to use an unorthodox method that Norma would never see coming. Agent Truesdale, who was an undercover specialist, had planned an undercover operation with Agent Morrow. During this operation, Agent Truesdale would meet Norma, posing as a friend of Fuller. He would take on an alias named Tony and tell Norma that he and Fuller had both served time in prison where they became friends. He would then inform Norma that Fuller was worried that she was talking and ask if she had said anything to the police. They hoped Norma would take the bait with this question and reveal all the secrets she had been hiding all these years. The investigators easily tracked down Norma. She had moved to Gass, a city in Kansas, in the late 1990s. But the Maine police still kept tabs on her. Ever since Sonny's death, she had received over $180,000 in life insurance and her husband's death benefits from the Navy. But she had somehow managed to squander it all, as her finances showed she was going through hard times. The investigators tracked her every move and found out she was working as a cleaning lady at a motel called Crossroads Motel. Once Norma was located and her movements were properly monitored, Special Agents Jeff Morrow and David Truesdale chose February 28, 2001. They took pictures and videos of her white car as they followed her to the motel where she worked. Once Norma had reached the parking lot, the NCIS agents who had been trailing her thought this would be the perfect place to make contact. So undercover agent Truesdale walked up to Norma and began the operation.
Norma? You Norma? Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Good. I'm Tony.
What, yeah?
My name's Tony. I'm a friend of Joe Fuller. He sent me out here to talk with you.
Agent Morrow, who was filming it all, was relieved that the initial stage of the undercover operation was a success. Agent Truesdale had managed to convince Norma that he was Tony, an ex-con friend of Fuller, and all he had to do now was get her to say something incriminating. So they got into Norma's car and continued their conversation.
Listen, the police have come back talking to Joe, and he's scared. And he wanted me to come out here. I owe Joe some favors from the penitentiary. He did some things for me. And he's heard that somebody's cooperating in the case. And
sure ain't me, honey. No, sir. No.
Okay. Well,
no.
Joe really didn't think it was you.
No, no way.
Okay. Well,
but I don't know who it could be.
While it wasn't a flat-out confession, Norma had unknowingly admitted that she knew something, as she told Agent Truesdale that she wasn't the snitch. She even said she didn't know who could be talking, before telling Agent Truesdale to assure Fuller that she wasn't talking to the cops.
Yeah, but get word back to him. There's no leak here. No leak whatsoever. And I expect the same.
Special Agent Morrow had a triumphant smile on his face when Norma said she expected the same. After 17 years, she had finally slipped up, and they had got her. But there was still something Norma said that was bugging the agents. She said she didn't know who could be talking, which implied that there might be more people in on this.
Who else did you tell?
You would ask me real quick. Big, tall fella. What is his name? Boyd Smith.
So Agent Truesdale asked if she had spoken to anyone else about it. At that point, all the NCIS agents and detectives who were listening in on the conversation knew they had this in the bag, because not only did they have Norma in a corner, they also had a new name. An in-depth investigation was immediately carried out into Boyd Smith, and it was revealed that during the summer of 1982, a man named Boyd Smith, who was the boyfriend of one of Sonny's daughters, Rosalind, moved into their home and lived as a tenant for a while. It took a while for the investigators to track him down, but just like Norma, they eventually found out where he was and what he was currently doing. So on April 6, 2001, they set up a similar undercover operation with Boyd. 2 undercover agents waited to meet him in a red car parked by the side of the road. And it wasn't long before Boyd showed up in his green pickup truck. After Boyd had gotten into the car, the NCIS undercover agents knew they had to play this carefully, because while Norma had unknowingly admitted her involvement, she didn't give them many details. So they had to ask Boyd a question that would lead him to reveal everything.
Well, what was the actual agreement with you and Norma? How did that all come about?
Norma wanted her husband gone. I mean, that was the bottom line. She was always bitching and rah about it and this and that. And when she asked me if I would do it, I said, no way, can't do it. And then she said, well, can you put me in contact with, arrange something?
And then you put her in contact with Joe?
Mm-hmm. I didn't make any agreement with Joe. I put him in contact with her.
After nearly 2 decades, the NCIS special agents and the Maine police had finally done it. They had gotten a hard confession from a witness in the case. After that, the undercover agents made some small talk with Boyd as they tried to get any additional information out of him before letting him go. The investigation was over as soon as Boyd Smith had stepped out of the car. And it wasn't long before they issued an arrest warrant for Norma Small. Norma E. Small was born in July 1939 to parents Mr. and Mrs. Russell Morris Small. She was raised in Belfast, Maine with her 2 sisters, Yvonne and Dorothy, and her brother Everett. She fell in love in her adolescent years and got married young to her boyfriend at the time, a man named Mervyn Sonny Grotton. Those who knew the couple made numerous statements to the police about how different they were. They often described Sonny as a nice person who was always ready to lend a helping hand, and Norma as a selfish, self-centered, and greedy person who always put herself before anyone else. The couple's friends at the time attributed Norma's brash behavior to the difference in their upbringing, as it was clear to everyone that these bad traits Norma had were developed during childhood. Sonny, who was deeply in love, didn't pay any mind to what people said. But things kept getting worse over the course of their 26-year marriage. Norma had an alarming amount of affairs, sold and consumed hard drugs, and often scammed and tricked people for her personal gain. During the many years of their long marriage, Norma's crass actions threatened to tear her family apart on more than one occasion, and she kept taking advantage of her husband Sonny, who always wanted to make it work for his children rather than throwing everything down the drain. In the latter years of her marriage, Norma often told all her friends that she hated her husband, and that the only reason she was with him was for his financial support. Further investigations into Norma showed that her husband was getting fed up with everything she had been doing, and rather than losing his financial support through a divorce, she planned to kill the father of her children, so she could live off his death benefit and inherit their real estate. The gruesome murder left detectives baffled for nearly 2 decades, and she almost got away with it, if not for the involvement of the NCIS. On May 7, 2001, the Waldo County jury charged Norma Small for the homicide of Melvin Sonny Grotton. She was arrested on May 9th in Lola, a city close to Gass in Kansas where she originally resided. The authorities who apprehended Norma took her to the Lola police station where she was questioned. During the interrogation, Norma Small confessed to her crime by telling officers that she had asked Boyd Smith to kill her husband for $10,000. Norma had told Boyd that she would pay him the money out of Sonny's pension when he was dead. She then stated that she eventually changed her mind, but could not find Boyd to stop him from shooting Sonny. With her confession out of the way, the detectives asked Norma why she had her husband killed, as they wanted to know what was going on in her life at that point, and if any emotional events led up to that. Norma then told the detectives that there wasn't any particular reason why she did it. She was just sick of him, so she had him murdered. Norma's statements baffled the detectives, as the couple's daughter Rosalind had already given the authorities information on Sonny and Norma's married life. She had told them that her father never raised his voice to her mother. He was never mean or abusive, and he always made sure to get his wife anything she wanted. The detectives felt she was lying and still holding back information, so they tried to get her to talk about the incident. During this period of the interrogation, Norma rambled on about how her creator had forgiven her for what she did, so she didn't have any guilt. When she was asked if her children would forgive her, she told the detectives that her children would understand. The interrogation eventually moved to the money she received after Sonny's death, as the detectives asked Norma if she thought she deserved that money after what she did. Norma then told the detectives that she deserved every penny because she didn't like working and it was the only thing she could live on. Every answer that came out of Norma's mouth horrified both the NCIS agents and the detectives. Agent Morrow would later describe Norma's attitude during the interrogation as cold and unremorseful. After a few more questions, the interrogation started nearing its end. But before it was over, the detectives asked about her supposed meeting with Fuller. Norma denied ever meeting him, and she told the officers that, contrary to what Boyd had told them, she had never met Fuller, and that she believed that Boyd was the hitman. The detectives knew Norma was lying, but even then, it was a contradiction to the story Boyd had told them. And Boyd, who was already arrested for his involvement, stood by his story, as he assured the detectives that Norma was lying. Both Norma and Boyd's statements were now turning into a he said, she said matter. But at the end of it all, Norma Small, Boyd Smith, and Joel Fuller all stood trial for the murder of Sonny Grotton. The 3 murder trials were held in the Sagadahoc County Courthouse during the winter of 2002. During Joel Fuller's trial, he told the court that he had nothing to do with Sonny Grotton's death, and to everyone's shock, he was found not guilty. The jury explained their verdict, saying that while they didn't believe him, there was no hard evidence that Fuller did it. Norma had never officially admitted that it was Joel Fuller who pulled the trigger during her questioning, and the incriminating statements she made to Agent Truesdale during the undercover operation were inadmissible in the trial, as the court considered it hearsay. It was a very divisive trial, as both the detectives and the city of Maine couldn't believe the outcome. Most residents believed Fuller was guilty, but there were still a few of them who believed in his innocence. The detectives had hoped the jurors would be able to see the truth in their investigation regardless of the available evidence, but they also understood the jury's decision. They knew that the key evidence against Joel Fuller was inadmissible, and there wasn't any hard evidence against him either, so the jury had nothing to convict him with. While it wasn't the verdict they wanted, the detectives still saw a silver lining, as even if Joel Fuller wasn't convicted for the murder, he was still serving multiple life sentences. Another jury was brought in during the trial of Boyd Smith. This time, there was hard evidence, and a confession that proved Boyd conspired to commit murder. But at the time, state law banned the prosecutors from charging Boyd with conspiracy, which meant he could only go to trial for the murder of Sonny Grotton. This put the jurors in a very hard spot, as while Boyd was guilty of conspiracy, they knew he didn't kill Sonny. His defense also hammered down this point during the trial, as they assured the jurors that he had removed himself from the conspiracy before the murder took place. So at the end of the trial, they had no choice but to let him go free. With the 2 trials out of the way, the last and final trial in the Sagadahoc County Courthouse was Norma's. Boyd, who had just been acquitted, was called as a witness, and he testified against her in court, telling the jurors that Norma wanted to collect her husband's military benefits, so she offered him $10,000 to kill her husband. Norma denied Boyd's statements, even going as far as telling the jurors that she had absolutely nothing to do with her husband's death. She was then asked by the prosecutors, who were led by Prosecutor Andrew Benson, why she had confessed to the crime during interrogation, but was now telling a different story in court. Norma then told the court that she never confessed, as she only told the detectives what they wanted to hear. Luckily, the presiding judge, Justice Nancy Mills, and the jurors saw through Norma's lies. And on August 2, 2002, after 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Norma Small guilty of both murder and theft. Before her sentencing, attorney Christopher McLean, who was representing Norma during the trial, argued for a 25-year sentence. But prosecutor Anderson Benson urged Justice Nancy Mills to sentence Norma to life for the murder of Sonny, plus an additional 10 years for the theft. After the respective arguments of the attorney and the prosecutor were made, the judge made her decision. While she was handing down the sentences, Justice Mills described Norma as a cold-hearted killer, with no compassion for her late husband, her 3 children, or her grandchildren. And in Justice Nancy Mills' own words, "This is a contract killing. This is a murder for hire. Mervyn Grotton was worth more to her dead than alive, and apparently that proved to be true." Norma Small was sentenced to 60 years in prison for the murder of her husband, Mervyn Sonny Grotton. She was also given an additional 10-year sentence for the theft after collecting more than $180,000 in death benefits and life insurance. During the aftermath of the trial, Norma's daughter Rosalind made a few statements about the case. She told the press that she was sick to her stomach when her mother said she and her siblings would understand. Rosalind said she was appalled when she found out that she could remember looking at her brother Michael and asking, "Who is this woman?" She also gave additional statements in a 2016 documentary, saying her father would not have justice as long as Norma lived. In Rosalind's own words, "My father has been 6 feet under since 1983, and she's still living. She's still breathing. She's watching TV, she's eating food, and my tax dollars are paying for her medicine, and it pisses me off because it shouldn't be like that. I believe in an eye for an eye. I'm sorry, but when you do something like that, the same thing should be done to you. Just let it be over. It's not really over until she's gone. I think that's the biggest part, is it's not going to be over until she's gone."
She was kind of like, well, it's an awful thing to say, but it's true, kind of a Jekyll and Hyde type of a person. She could be fine one minute, and then the next minute you want to duck because something's going to go flying and you're going to get hit. My dad was such a nice person that he would be helping everyone else in any spare moment that he had. And it would piss my mother off to no end because she was a selfish person and he was a giving person. They were brought up 2 totally different ways.
Norma's son Michael also made statements about the case, telling the press about his parents' married life. In Michael's own words, "The contrast between him, Sonny, and my mother is just amazing. They couldn't be any more different. He was a morally focused person who believed in the American dream, and that's what he was focused on. My mother, on the other hand, was always running a con. She was very unfaithful. It made a very unstable home life for us. There were always these kinds of dueling parental influences at play. I've always said that if my dad wasn't as morally strong as he was, I don't know where we kids would have ended up in this life. He, Sonny, was the type of guy who felt that anything could be fixed, even that marriage." Michael then spoke about how similar his life was to his father's, saying, "Our lives are parallel. We went through tragedies very young. We're both very intensely focused on family and on providing a moral example. I learned to be a man and a father from my father." On March 26, 2023, 40 years after the murder of her husband, Sonny Grotton, Norma Small was pronounced dead. Norma, who was 83, died in the care of medical personnel at exactly 12:17 a.m. that Sunday morning at the Women's Center in Windham. She died while serving her 70-year prison sentence for homicide and insurance theft. The Sonny Grotton case shows not only the dedication but the drive of many law enforcement agencies to bring justice to the numerous unsolved and cold cases out there, no matter how long it takes. It also serves as a spotlight on the state of the criminal justice system and its divisive nature. We'd love to know your thoughts on the case, as there are still many uncertain questions from the trials. Do you think Joel Fuller was the assassin? Or was it Boyd Smith who pulled the trigger? There's also the question of whether the jury set a guilty man free. Feel free to discuss your thoughts and opinions on these questions in the comment section below. And if you would like us to cover a case, please drop your recommendation in the comment section as well. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories like this.
And moving down to the right leg area, down past the knee, got a stain here, 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 and here.
Somebody got to be playing games, okay? Because y'all trying to tell me that I murdered a girl that I only knew for a short period of time. I'm saying I didn't murder nobody, and I truly don't know that girl.
Okay, is that your DNA at that house?
It shouldn't be.
No, but is it?
Is it? I don't know.
Joe, Ain't no wiggle room in this one. None.
Wasn't me. It wasn't me.
You want to take your chances with the jury?
You damn right, because that was not me.
May 6th, 1988. What was usually a sunny spring for the residents of Mount Vernon, Illinois, turned out to be a day of tragedy for 22-year-old nurse Jana Reynolds. As the spring air weaved its way through the neighborhood, Jana's cold, lifeless body lay still within the depths of her own home. Despite the best efforts of the police, the perpetrator remained unknown. The search continued for over a decade, until finally, investigators were able to make a breakthrough. Investigators finally were able to answer the question, who killed Jana Reynolds? Let us dive right in and unveil the truth behind the case of Jana Reynolds. This case takes us to Mount Vernon, a city and the county seat of Jefferson County, Illinois in the United States. Founded in 1817 by Zadok Casey, this place is renowned as the Festival Art City, or the King City, and as of 2021, has been home to over 35,404 people. It is home to many notable places such as Cedarhurst Center for the Arts, Jefferson County Historical Museum and Village, and C.E. Brehm Memorial Public Library. Despite its charm, crime rates in Mount Vernon are notably higher. Mount Vernon, Illinois has a much higher crime rate of violent crime than the U.S. average, with 63.7 incidents compared to 22.7 respectively. These statistics highlight the significant crime challenges faced by the community. The most common types of crimes reported in Mount Vernon include theft, burglary, assault, and robbery. The city has taken steps to address the crime problem, including increasing police presence and implementing community policing programs. It is against this backdrop the tragic end of Jana Reynolds unfolds. Jana Reynolds was born on January 15, 1966, to parents Robert Wellmaker and Marilyn Jane Wellmaker, and was the sister to her older brother Alex G. Wellmaker. In 1987, Jana got married to Jeff Reynolds, who was her high school sweetheart. Everything was going well. Jana was a nurse at Mount Vernon Good Samaritan Hospital and was pursuing her associate degree in nursing at college, with just one more year left before her graduation in 1988. Meanwhile, Jana's husband worked at a nearby printing company. She was known for living a good, normal life and was well liked by those who knew her. The investigation into Jana's death made everyone in the community upset and confused. People wanted to know what happened and hoped for justice. Even in the sadness, the community promised to remember Jana for the wonderful person she was and to keep her memory alive in Mount Vernon. On May 6, 1988, Jeff Reynolds worked overnight. When he returned home the next morning, he discovered something that would change his life forever.
Her car was under the carport. Thought nothing of it. And walked in. Noticed the back door had been broken into. And walked in and hollered for her. And I found her.
When he finally reached his home, he found that Jana's car was still in the carport, which was not the usual. Normally, when Jeff comes home from work, Jana would have already left for school. So he went inside, wondering why she didn't go to school. The first sign that something was wrong as he went inside was the broken back door. As he entered the bedroom, he found 22-year-old Jana laying on the bed, covered in blood. The sight that Jeff stumbled upon was horrifying. She had been repeatedly stabbed, her throat cut several times, her right hand nearly amputated, and from the look of it, she had also been assaulted. Shocked by what he had bared witness to, he immediately called 911. stating that his wife was murdered. Officer Vladetich from the Mount Vernon Police Department received the call from Jeff. He arrived at the crime scene a few minutes later and began investigating the crime scene for any clues. After some time, the medical examiner established that Jana was probably killed between 12 p.m. and 3 a.m. Upon promptly arriving at the scene, officers discovered the lifeless body of Jana. She was on the bed in thermal pajama bottoms, but her underwear was down, hanging on her leg. Her wrist was hurt and cut to the point where it had almost been detached from her arm, and her throat was also slit. Typically, in murder cases, the husband is frequently a suspect. However, in Jana Reynolds' case, things took a different turn. Jeff had a solid alibi. He was at work throughout the whole incident. Consequently, he was excluded as a suspect, and investigators shifted their focus to other individuals. When the police asked around the neighborhood, they paid attention to a person, Albert McDaniels, who was walking on the street during the supposed hour of the murder. He told the investigators that he knew nothing and had not seen anything out of the ordinary. Police took samples of his blood, pubic hair, and saliva for a DNA test. They tested the samples, but the results were negative, so they ruled out Albert as a person responsible for the killing. Samples were collected from various suspects, including another man named Joe Tucker, who had been seen in the area that night. Tucker agreed to provide a sample of his hair from his head, but no additional samples were taken. The hair sample did not match the fragment found at the scene. However, the pathologist emphasized that ruling out the suspect would require pubic hair samples. Despite following up on more than 300 leads, the investigation into Jana's murder eventually went cold. The killer had effectively disappeared without a trace. Mount Vernon officers searched the neighborhood thoroughly, hoping to find any signs of the killer. They went down the streets, checked the alleys, and searched in trash cans, looking for anything that might be connected to the crime. Unfortunately, the neighborhood search didn't reveal any leads. By the end of 1988, detectives couldn't charge anyone with the crime, and the case became unsolved and forgotten. They preserved all the collected evidence with care, hoping that advancements in technology might open up new possibilities for testing and analysis. Sadly, after Jana Reynolds was murdered, her case remained unsolved for 13 years. In August 2001, Detective McElroy from the Mount Vernon Police Department started reviewing the physical evidence collected during the investigation. He anticipated that new advancements in forensic science and technology might help uncover fresh leads. He decided to reopen the case, now with the help of a new tool called Alternative Light Source. This new tool uses the different wavelengths of light to identify varying stains on clothes, from biological fluid to fiber or trace materials. Investigators looked into Jana's pajama pants and underwear, discovering stains that were identified as seminal fluid. This finding offered more robust DNA evidence for the case compared to what they had 13 years ago. The investigator found 23 different stains on Jana Reynolds' pajamas. They could have DNA, so they sent the clothes to a private laboratory, Cellmark, for further testing. First, they did a preliminary test to make sure the stains found were in fact semen. The investigators were right. It was seminal fluid, and about 2 weeks later, investigators developed a profile of the person responsible for leaving the stains on the thermal bottoms of Jana. The investigators' hope was to finally unravel the enduring mystery that had haunted them for so long. In 2002, detectives utilized advanced forensic technology to analyze Jana's dress. The outcome of this testing allowed them to establish a DNA profile of a male whose bodily fluids were present on her dress. Detective McElroy looked again at the old cases and noticed a connection between the attack on Jana Reynolds and the Dina Dahl assault case. Taking a chance, he asked the crime lab to compare evidence from Joe Tucker with evidence from the Dina Dahl case and his unknown profile in the Reynolds case. It turns out that one suspect matches in both cases. The identified profile belonged to Joe Tucker. Detective McElroy told Jana's husband Jeff that they were going to arrest the suspect.
He called me on the phone and told me that he was going to go make an arrest. They were going after him.
Joe Tucker was born on the 9th of February 1964. He had a list of criminal histories. Since 1988, Joe had gotten into trouble in Illinois and was currently working in Missouri. In September of 1988, Joe received a 2-year sentence for drug charges. In 1990, he went back to prison for another 3-year sentence for theft. In 1996, he returned to prison receiving a 4-year sentence for burglary and another 4 years for drugs. After a quick parole, he found himself back in prison in 1998 with a 6-year sentence for burglary and a 5-year sentence for aggravated battery. He was free again by 2002, but was later arrested for the murder of Jana Reynolds. In May 2002, Tucker's DNA was linked to stains on Jana's pajamas while he was residing in Springfield, Missouri. The police had to travel to Springfield to locate Joe Tucker, and at last, in 2002, he got arrested for murdering Jana Reynolds. During interrogation, he constantly denied murdering Jana.
Was enough root material for the lab to do DNA on you. They compared it to the DNA they found on her bedding and clothes. It was a 1 in 17 trillion match. He said, man, there ain't even that many people on the face of the earth.
Somebody got to be playing games, okay? Because y'all trying to tell me that I murdered a girl that I only knew for a short period of time. I'm saying I didn't murder nobody, and I truly don't know that girl.
Okay, is that your DNA at that house?
It shouldn't be.
No, but is it?
Is it? I don't know.
Joe, ain't no wiggle room in this one. None.
Wasn't me. It wasn't me. Okay.
You won't take your chances with the jury on
You damn right, because that was not me.
He strongly denied being the perpetrator, but acknowledged knowing Jana. They had worked together at a Wendy's restaurant in the early 1980s. He insisted that he had never been to Jana Reynolds' home in 1988. But a DNA report was against him, which was enough to prove him wrong. While waiting for trial, Tucker was sent to Menard Prison because of parole violations. While in jail, he confided in another inmate, revealing all the details about the case. The inmate's name was Robin Getch. Joe did not know that Getch was known as a jailhouse lawyer. In 2002, the state's attorney telephoned police investigators and told them that they had received a letter from a prisoner named Robin Getch. Following this information, Detective McElroy interviewed Getch about the matter, and Getch showed him the letters. In a letter, Getch claimed to have information about Jana's death. Investigators interviewed him and stated that the defendant had approached him to help prepare a defense for the defendant's case. During the court proceedings, Getch testified that Tucker had admitted to breaking into the house with the intention of burglary and assault on his victim on the 6th of May. Additionally, he confessed to killing Jana. When interrogated and confronted with the facts, Tucker caved in and admitted to going to Jana's house with his friend Albert McDaniels on the night of May 5th, 1988. Joe said he introduced them and then went to the bedroom to get intimate with Jana. Tucker stated that McDaniels entered the room because he insisted on having a physical relationship with her. According to Tucker, when she refused, McDaniels murdered her. He explained that he didn't come forward earlier because McDaniels had threatened him. Tucker's account faces a significant challenge because the house's back door was forcefully broken into. This detail contradicts the idea of Jana willingly letting them in. All of that was a lie, just to save himself from the case. On April 11, 2006, a jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Joe Tucker guilty of murdering Jana Reynolds. After the trial, the jury determined that the crime involved was exceptionally cruel and exhibited heinous behavior. Joe Tucker was found guilty of 10 counts of first-degree murder on June 28, 2006, and received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Joe Tucker, 59 years old, is currently incarcerated at Western Illinois Correctional Center. In the aftermath of the trial, which concluded on June 28, 2006, the defendant's post-trial motion was denied by the court. A grand jury indicted Joe Tucker on 10 counts of first-degree murder and assault. The use of advanced DNA testing and modern forensic techniques proved to be crucial in solving this case and making sure Jana got justice. A long-standing mystery was resolved with the conviction of Joe Tucker for Jana Reynolds' murder and assault. This also shows how dedicated law enforcement is to resolving cases to keep their communities safe and solve cold cases. Jana Reynolds' grave is in Mount Vernon Memorial Gardens, Woodlawn, Illinois. As the case of Jana Reynolds' murder finds some closure after many years, we reflect on the emotions that this revelation stirs. Cases like these show us that solving cold cases can be very hard, and they make us realize how important it is to use new technology to help solve them. It also emphasizes the need for justice and closure for the victims' families and the community. So what do you think about the role that advancements in forensic technology have played in solving long-standing cold cases like this one? If there are other cases you want us to cover, or if you have ideas for our next story, please tell us in the comments. Do comment and share your opinion, as we deeply value them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and turn on the notifications to never miss any future cases. It was a quiet Sunday morning on June 14, 1974, in Fairfield Township, Ohio. However, in this southwestern Ohio farm community, where normally cornfields and churches are the main attractions, a shocking discovery was made. Ruth Doench, a familiar face in the local church, was absent that day. In her home, just by the front door, lay Ruth, in a disturbing state. She was partially clothed and had a gardening axe embedded in her forehead. The gruesome scene was something out of a horror movie. With very little blood despite the brutal scene, detectives were left with ever-increasing questions. Who could have committed such a heinous crime against Ruth Doench? And what led to this act of extreme violence? Fairfield Township in Butler County, Ohio, with its population of around 22,645 as of 2020, is a blend of modern suburban life and historical charm. Known for its serene, family-friendly environment, the township boasts a mix of recreational and historic attractions. The community is active and engaged, often gathering in local parks or participating in community events. While it maintains a relatively low violent crime rate of 12.5, a lower value to the U.S. average contributing to its appeal as a safe and peaceful place to live, it's not immune to the darker aspects of society. This is exemplified by the Ruth Doench cold case, a stark reminder that even the most tranquil communities can have their share of mysteries. Ruth Doench, born in 1902, had a life that was as humble as it was impactful. Her parents, George and Mabel, raised Ruth alongside her 4 sisters, Mabel, Alice, Marianne, and Dorothy, in an era where life was simpler yet full of challenges. Despite the lack of detailed public records about her early life, a former student, Cynthia Blizzard, provided a heartwarming glimpse into Ruth's character. In the 1960s, Ruth Doench was the principal at Hayes Elementary in Hamilton, Ohio. Cynthia, who was one of her students, recalls how Mrs. Doench made every child feel special. She wasn't just a principal. She was a nurturing figure, a source of inspiration. Her professional demeanor never wavered. Yet it was her ability to make each student feel loved and protected that set her apart. Cynthia finally remembers Mrs. Doench's belief in the greatness of their school, instilling pride and confidence in her students. This dedication to her role and the impact she had on young minds speaks volumes about Ruth Doench's character. She wasn't just an educator, she was a pillar in her community, shaping young lives with compassion and a firm belief in their potential. Her untimely and tragic end remains a stark contrast to the warm and nurturing spirit she embodied throughout her life. The morning of July 14, 1974, in Fairfield Township in Ohio, brought a grim discovery that shook the quiet farm community. The cornfields, usually a symbol of life and growth, stood in stark contrast to the tragedy unfolding in the town. While the local church was bustling with parishioners, one of its regular attendees, 73-year-old Ruth Doench, was conspicuously absent. Ruth, a retired school principal, was found lifeless in the den of her home at 4150 Tylersville Road. The details of the scene were harrowing. She had been stabbed twice in the chest. Her body moved from the breezeway off the garage to the den. There she suffered criminal assault and was struck twice with a mattock, a tool similar to a pickaxe. The left side of her neck bore ugly bruise marks, suggesting a strong grasp. The positioning and nature of the stab wounds indicated a right-handed assailant. The extent of the attack was unprecedented in the local law enforcement's experience. Ruth's home was not in disarray, and nothing of significant value appeared to be missing. This left investigators puzzled about the motive behind such a violent act. Among the items that were reported missing were one black patent leather shoe with a Cuban heel, a pair of shorts, a small black change purse with a plastic top, and the knife used in the attack. Intriguingly, the matching shoe to the one missing was found near Ruth's body. Contents from her change purse, including coins and car keys, were scattered on the breezeway floor. Her glasses lay nearby, and her open pocketbook containing nearly $50 was also found close to her body. Ruth, known to be cautious and always keeping her doors locked, had declined an invitation to attend a wedding that evening, choosing instead to stay home and sew a dress. This decision, reportedly made earlier that day, suggested the murderer might not have known she would be at home. However, some authorities speculate that Ruth, a widow living with a heart condition, might have known her attacker. The timeline of the tragic event indicates that Ruth probably went to a supermarket in Hamilton after 4:30 p.m. and returned home before 5:30 p.m. She was believed to have been murdered before 8 p.m., with her body being discovered the following Sunday afternoon. The inhumane crime left the community with haunting questions. Who would commit such an act against a woman, dead or nearly so, and then strike her with such ferocity? Why would they do it? Authorities urged residents to report any unusual sightings, particularly of pickup trucks or similar vehicles in the area that Saturday night. In the wake of Ruth Doench's tragic death, the Fairfield Township Police Department, accompanied by the Sheriff Department and County Prosecutor, launched a meticulous investigation. The case required extensive lab tests conducted by the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation in London. A significant breakthrough in the investigation was the identification of the blood type of the man responsible for the assault. The community surrounding the Doench residence was engulfed in a state of fear and suspicion, wary of strangers and unfamiliar faces. In one incident, a 16-year-old boy from Hamilton was taken into custody for peering into a window in the neighborhood. Although he was later released, this event reflected the heightened vigilance in the area. In an effort to accelerate the case, concerned residents, friends, and relatives of Mrs. Doench collectively offered over $2,000 as a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer. The county prosecutor, John Holcomb, encouraged people to provide information anonymously if preferred, ensuring their confidentiality. Detectives delved into Ruth Doench's past interactions, questioning friends, delivery personnel, and repairmen in the community. But all were cleared of suspicion. Detective Deaton then discovered a promising lead while examining Ruth's personal belongings. He found a receipt book listing individuals who rented a small home on Doench's 18-acre property.
Found the names and began actually looking for those folks to determine where they lived, were they still in the area, were they still in the neighborhood.
As the investigation into Ruth Doench's tragic death progressed, a significant lead emerged. The police identified one of the renters on her property as Donald Korn, a local resident who had been living in Doench's guest house for over a year. This discovery prompted the detectives to approach Korn for questioning.
He interviewed very well. He had me convinced that he was not a person that would do something of this nature, and he had alibis at the time, as I recall.
Despite the detectives' initial suspicions about Korn's involvement, they faced a significant hurdle: the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime. This lack of evidence became a critical turning point in the case. Without hard proof to connect Korn or any other individual to the murder, the investigation hit a standstill. As a result, the case went cold. The Ruth Doench cold case, which had left Fairfield Township, Ohio in a state of unrest, saw a dramatic turn of events 5 months later. In Jeffersonville, Indiana, a small town about 130 miles southwest of Fairfield Township, another brutal attack occurred, igniting a series of events that would eventually lead to a breakthrough. On a quiet evening in Jeffersonville, 54-year-old Dorothy Hendren was relaxing on her couch, watching Chico and the Man, when her life took a terrifying turn. An intruder attacked her, holding a knife to her throat, and subsequently assaulting her.
And at that moment, he cut her throat. And she was begging him, "Please tell me what you want me to do. I'll do anything, just don't kill me."
Despite her pleas, the attacker was relentless. Hendren, in a desperate bid to survive, played dead. After the attack, the assailant rummaged through her house for valuables and then left. Hendren, grievously injured, but alive, managed to call 911. She was rushed to the hospital, fighting for her life. Forensic teams collected blood and hair samples from the crime scene, but with limited evidence, the case hinged on Hendren's survival and testimony.
We only had Mrs. Hendren, waiting for her, hoping that she would survive to give us more information.
Miraculously, Hendren survived and provided a description of her attacker. However, the police had no name to match the description until Kathy Allen, Hendren's neighbor, came forward with crucial information. 3 days after the attack, Kathy Allen contacted the police, recounting a disturbing encounter she had witnessed near Hendren's house on the night of the assault.
I saw him when he pulled up, and then I saw him get out of the El Camino, and I never dreamed that anything like what happened would happen.
This man was not a stranger to Allen. A month earlier, he had lured her onto his houseboat and attacked her.
He knocked me down. He was on top of me. And he was trying to get my clothes off. He did get some of my clothes off. And then I started biting, and he bit me back. And then I bit his hand, and when he let go, I just remember I got away. I got out. I flew.
Now, with Hendren's assault, Allen felt compelled to come forward, and she named Donald Korn as the assailant. Donald Korn was promptly arrested in 1977 and placed in an Indiana jail cell. A search of Korn's houseboat yielded incriminating evidence: a pair of bloody shoes matching footprints found at Hendren's crime scene, and even more damning, Hendren's purse discovered in the river near Korn's boat. The case took another crucial turn when Ron Kemp, an investigator, engaged Korn in a conversation in his office. Kemp, in a soft-spoken and strategic approach, offered Korn coffee and food, and after some preliminary talk, he directly confronted Korn about the murder of Ruth Doench in Ohio.
And I said, before I do this, Donald, I need to know something. Did you kill Mrs. Doench in Ohio? He said, yes, I stabbed her in the heart. Did you attack Mrs. Hendren? Yes, I did that also. And he said, I want to get those things off my chest.
Korn's confession was a monumental breakthrough. Kemp's skillful interrogation provided Ohio detectives with a confession they had been seeking for months. The confession sealed Korn's fate in Indiana and served as a vital piece of evidence in solving the mystery of Ruth Doench's murder. Donald Korn, born in 1945, remains an unknown figure due to the limited information about his early life, parents, and work. However, he was said to have formerly lived in Fairfield, and during the time of Doench's death, he was a tenant who rented space in her guest house. In 1977, the case against Donald Korn, the man responsible for the crimes against Ruth Doench and Dorothy Hendren, reached a critical juncture. Korn, arrested and brought to trial on June 1, 1977, challenged the legal process during his trial. He claimed that his rights were infringed upon during the interrogation, specifically alleging that he had requested an attorney but was denied. The police refuted Korn's claims, insisting that he never asked for legal representation. In Indiana, this dispute didn't gain any traction, and his appeal found no ground. However, the situation in Ohio took a different turn.
The Court of Appeals looked at the law and said, we don't have an appetite for what we're about to do, but we feel that the law requires us to throw out the confession because he asked for an attorney. And that's what we're required to do. We're required to follow the law.
With the confession ruled inadmissible, the core of the case against Korn in the Ruth Doench murder was significantly weakened.
When that was done, it kind of gutted the case. I mean, that was, at that time, the core of the case was his confession. And without that confession, the prosecutor at the time felt that he couldn't prosecute.
To think that he was going to get off scot-free on this heinous crime that he had confessed to and had been convicted on and was sentenced to death to die in the electric chair, I was just shattered that he had gotten off scot-free.
As a result of the overturned conviction in Ohio, Korn was no longer held accountable for the murder of Ruth Doench. However, he still faced a significant sentence in Indiana for the attack on Dorothy Hendren, with a minimum of 20 years in prison. This outcome provided some solace, but it was also troubling for those who worried about the possibility of his eventual release.
All you got to do is look at this guy and look into his eyes, and you can tell that he's a killer. And the way he committed both of these crimes in Indiana and in Ohio, I wouldn't want this guy back out on the street.
2 decades later, in January of 2000, the name Donald Corn had largely faded from public memory in Hamilton, Ohio. The horrific murder of Ruth Doench had receded into the past for many, but not for the dedicated few whose job was to delve into cold cases. Frank Smith, a diligent investigator, revisited the Ruth Doench homicide with a fresh perspective, searching for any overlooked details that might conclusively link Corn to the murder. While meticulously examining old files, Smith discovered a crucial lead. A woman named Lois Ambergy, who was in fact Donald Corn's sister. Taking a chance, Smith visited her.
When I knocked on the door and I introduced myself and I explained to her that I was there because of her brother, she told me that it had been a long time coming, that there was something that she needed to tell us.
Ambergy had never spoken with the police, and her conversation marked her first interaction with the police regarding her brother. In a taped deposition, Ambergy detailed conversations between her, her mother, and Donald Corn during their visits to the state prison. These conversations contained Corn's own confessions of his criminal deeds.
My mother asked him, Donnie, did you do that? Did you kill Mrs. Doench?
And what was Mr. Corn's brother's response?
He said yes. All I know is I said, Donnie, how could you do that? And he said, don't worry about it, sis. What's done is done.
Ambergy's testimony provided Smith with the breakthrough he needed, a first-hand account of Corn's confession to the murder of Ruth Doench. With Corn's potential parole date approaching, Smith acted swiftly. He secured a grand jury indictment for Corn's involvement in the murder of Ruth Doench and prepared for trial. The prosecuting attorney, Piper, was resolute in his objective.
We had to take a swing at it. Whether we failed, whether we were successful or not, wasn't as important as the fact that we had to be committed to try to get a conviction so we could keep him in prison for the rest of his life so the rest of us could be safe.
Piper presented the case against Corn, with Ambergy's statement as a central piece of evidence. After the trial proceedings, the jury returned with their decision on June 17th. Corn was found guilty of aggravated murder. Although the crime no longer qualified for the death penalty under Ohio law, Corn received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 30 years. This verdict ensured that Donald Corn would spend a significant portion of his life in prison, a resolution that brought a measure of closure and safety to the community still haunted by his crimes. For Ruth Doench's family, the conviction of Corn signified the end of a harrowing ordeal that had spanned decades. The years of uncertainty and anguish they endured while seeking justice for Ruth were finally over. This closure, though long delayed, brought a semblance of peace to her family, allowing them to turn a painful chapter in their lives.
Our fear was really a real fear that he would come after us and try to harm us or my daughters.
What could have been done differently in the initial investigation? And how might modern forensic techniques have altered the course of this case if they had been available then? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your insights are valuable to us. And if there's a specific case you'd like us to explore, please don't hesitate to share your suggestions or drop your recommendations in the comment section below. For more captivating true crime stories, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And stay tuned for more intriguing investigations.
Kamaya Mobley was just hours old when she was taken from the nursing ward at University Medical Center back in 1998.
As for the child's mother, she is still in shock over the crime.
She shouldn't have never left out my arms from the beginning.
On July 10th, 1998, in Jacksonville, Florida, 16-year-old Jana Mobley experienced what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. She had just given birth to a beautiful daughter, surrounded by the love and support of her family, community, and church. Everything was set for her baby girl's homecoming. But joy turned to despair in less than 9 hours, when her daughter was mysteriously taken from the hospital, vanishing without a trace. How did this happen? And where could a newborn be possibly taken overnight? Jacksonville, Florida, with a population of about 971,319 as of 2020, is the most populous city in the state and known for its expansive size, making it the largest city by area in the contiguous United States. This vibrant city, perched on the Atlantic coast, is renowned for its rich history, bustling port, and a mix of recreational and historic places that shape its residents' lifestyles. Jacksonville's community is diverse, contributing to a dynamic cultural scene that includes numerous parks, museums, and beaches, offering a blend of leisure and historical exploration. However, it's also important to note the city's crime rate, which is 17% higher than the national average. It presents challenges. Amidst this backdrop, the Kamaya Mobley case unfolded, a notable event in the city's recent history.
Please bring my baby. I know you. If you don't have no kids, if you was faking a pregnancy or, you just can't have no kids. How you think I feel? True enough, I'm only 16 years old, but I have feelings, so that's my first child.
A day that was supposed to be filled with joy and new beginnings, July 10th, 1998. Instead, it became a date etched in sorrow for Jana Mobley. Just a teenager herself at 16, she welcomed her daughter Kamaya into the world at University Medical Center in Jacksonville, Florida, at the break of dawn, about 6:55 a.m. This day, however, took a tragic turn just 8 hours after the birth. A nurse who had been closely interacting with Jana and Kamaya, offering assistance and engaging in conversations, suddenly became part of a nightmare scenario. The nurse who had been there under the guise of helping had built a sense of trust with Jana, even assisting her to walk and change into a new gown. Later in the afternoon, with Jana exhausted and vulnerable, the nurse suggested putting Kamaya in her baby carrier, claiming she needed to take the baby for a routine temperature check. It seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary, especially when Kamaya's grandmother entered the room and was briefly introduced to the little one, before the nurse took her away, promising a quick return. But as minutes turned to 20 minutes and Kamaya wasn't brought back, panic set in. Jana, overwhelmed with a sense of dread, began a desperate search through the hospital corridors, a heartbreaking sense of a mother's fear escalating into absolute terror. The hospital, alerted to the unthinkable reality of an abduction, immediately contacted the police, setting in motion an exhaustive search operation. Surveillance footage would later reveal a woman, thought to be just another family member by the hospital staff, walking away with Kamaya unnoticed. This woman, dressed in a blue smock with flowers, green scrubs, and surgical gloves, had managed to walk out with Kamaya without raising suspicion. The police launched a citywide search, sealing off the hospital, stopping buses, and alerting airports to be on the lookout for the baby. every corner of Jacksonville was scrutinized, from trains to hospital rooms, with helicopters scouring from above. Yet despite these efforts, Kamaya was nowhere to be found. The suspect, described from surveillance and eyewitness accounts, was believed to be an African-American woman in her early 30s, possibly wearing a wig with shoulder-length dark brown hair. The theory was that she might have been someone who had recently lost a child, or was pretending to be pregnant. The police pursued numerous leads, asked for public assistance, and remained hopeful, relying on statistics that favored the recovery of abducted infants. Days turned into agonizing weeks for Kamaya's family, left to wonder about her fate and well-being, along with the identity of the woman who had so brazenly taken her away from them. With no photographs of Kamaya taken before her abduction, the authorities were forced to release a composite sketch to aid in her identification, a hopeful plea to the public for any information that might lead to her safe return. Despite the detectives' optimism and the high recovery rate in similar cases, Kamaya remained missing. Questions haunted everyone involved. Was Kamaya still alive? Was she safe? Who was the woman who had so shamelessly taken her, and why? In the wake of Kamaya Mobley's disappearance, the investigation took a turn that saw suspicion cast in multiple directions. At the heart of this turmoil was Craig Aitken, Kamaya's father, who found himself under the microscope despite being incarcerated at the time of his daughter's birth and subsequent abduction. The complexity of his relationship with Shanera Mobley due to their age difference and the circumstances of Kamaya's conception added layers to an already intricate case. Despite his physical absence, Craig's desire to understand what happened to his daughter was as strong as Shanera's. As days turned into weeks with no sign of Kamaya, the focus of suspicion shifted unpredictably. Shanera, a young mother of only 16, faced scrutiny not only from law enforcement, but from the community, and even those closest to her. The unthinkable notion that she might have had a role in her own daughter's disappearance was compounded by Craig's own legal troubles, which seemed to cast a shadow over their plight. The investigation was relentless, with police exploring every conceivable angle, including the possibility that Craig had orchestrated the abduction from behind bars, or that Shanera and Craig had colluded in some way. The pressure on Shanera was immense, leading to a heart-wrenching moment when she defended her innocence with a poignant reflection on her choice to bring Kamaya into the world despite challenging circumstances. The ripple effect of suspicion even touched Shanera's mother, who was present during the abduction. The weight of guilt and the instinct to find someone to blame engulfed the family, causing fractures and accusations that only added to the pain. Throughout this ordeal, the police and the public kept a keen eye on the family, dissecting their every move and word. As the investigation broadened, the authorities spared no resources, combing through leads, interviewing countless individuals, and distributing flyers with Kamaya's sketch and details about the suspect. The hospital Kamaya was abducted from announced a significant reward of $250,000, hoping to entice information that could lead to her return. Yet despite these efforts, the case turned cold, with Kamaya's whereabouts remaining a mystery. The emotional toll on Shanera was immeasurable. She lived in a state of suspended grief, holding on to hope by commemorating Kamaya's birth each year with a cake, a symbol of her unwavering love and the hope of reunion. The legal battle against the hospital for its security failures resulted in a financial settlement, but no amount could compensate for the loss Shanera endured. It wasn't until after nearly 2 decades before the truth about Kamaya's fate would emerge. A revelation that would finally answer the agonizing questions that haunted Shanera. In 2017, an astonishing revelation came to light in Walterboro, South Carolina, that would unravel the mystery of Kamaya Mobley's disappearance. A teenager named Alexis Manigo, at 18 years old, faced a life-altering discovery. Alexis, eager to embark on her journey into adulthood with her first job, encountered a significant hurdle. She lacked the necessary identification and social security number to proceed. It was this pivotal moment that led her so-called mother, Gloria Williams, to confess a shocking truth. Alexa was not her biological daughter. Gloria revealed that she abducted Alexis from a hospital on the day she was born, raising her as her own ever since. The emotional turmoil that ensued for Alexis was profound. Despite the staggering revelation, Alexis grappled with conflicting loyalties. She implored Gloria to flee, to evade the authorities, and continue their lives in secrecy. However, Gloria, burdened by the weight of her actions, felt compelled to face the consequences. She could not bear the thought of leaving Alexis, the daughter she had raised for 18 years, despite the origins of that relationship. Alexis, torn and bewildered, confided in only a close friend, having carried that heavy secret alone. Nevertheless, approximately a year and a half after this confession, an anonymous tip to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children blew the case wide open. Authorities were alerted, leading to a pre-dawn arrest at Gloria's residence. Amidst the chaos, January 12, 2017, was the day police received the DNA confirmation that Alexis, now known to the world as Kamaya Mobley, was the long-lost child kidnapped 18 years earlier. This breakthrough not only closed a chapter on an 18-year-long mystery, but also opened a complex web of emotions, identities, and legal ramifications. Alexis, now aware of her true heritage, was thrust into the national spotlight, embodying the living link between a painful past and a hopeful future. Kamaya Mobley's life story is one marked by an extraordinary journey, from abduction to discovery, and the complex process of reuniting with her biological family. Born on July 10, 1998, to Shanera Mobley and Craig Aiken, Kamaya was abducted by Gloria Williams, who raised her as her own daughter, Alexis Manigo, in Walterboro, South Carolina. In this small, close-knit community, Alexis grew up as a typical young woman, doing well in school, attending church on Sundays, and sharing a close bond with Gloria, whom she believed to be her mother. Alexis's upbringing was filled with normal activities, such as cheering on her big brother at basketball games, and getting her nails done with Gloria, who provided her with love, care, and the comfort of a stable home. Despite the nurturing environment, the truth about Alexis's origin was a shadow that loomed large, eventually coming to light in a revelation that would change everything. The emotional roller coaster that followed the discovery of her true identity was compounded by the legal ramifications for Gloria Williams. As Alexis grappled with the reality of her situation, authorities worked to reconnect her with her birth parents, Shanera and Craig. The reunion process was filled with mixed emotions, from Shanera's unimaginable joy and relief at finding her daughter alive, to the complexities of building a relationship from scratch. Their first meeting over FaceTime was a poignant moment, marked by mutual curiosity and a surprising ease of communication, as if no strangers were present, but rather a family separated only by circumstances. Despite the initial warmth, challenges lay ahead. Shanera's disappointment upon learning that Alexis had not alerted authorities upon discovering her abduction highlighted the tangled web of emotions and loyalties at play. Alexis's desire to continue to be identified as Alexis and her reluctance to see Gloria face severe punishment underscored the depth of their bond and the difficulty of navigating her newfound reality. For Shanera and Craig, the dream of a seamless reunion faced hurdles as they confronted Alexis's allegiance to the only mother she had ever known. Gloria Williams, born in 1965, found herself at a tumultuous point in her life around the time she abducted Kamaya Mobley in 1998. At 33 years old, Gloria had experienced the profound loss of a miscarriage, a fact she kept hidden, allowing her to maintain the appearance of a pregnancy due to phantom pregnancy symptoms. This period was marked by intense pressure from her then-boyfriend, Charles Menigo, whose desire for a child was entangled with a pattern of physical abuse, which Gloria believes led to her miscarriage. The situation at home had deteriorated to such an extent that Gloria's sons from a previous marriage were deemed unsafe and taken to live with their father. Charles insisted on having a baby, as he believed a baby would stabilize their volatile relationship. Driven by a mix of despair and hope for a change, Gloria went on what she described as autopilot, embarking on a 4-hour drive that ended at the hospital where Shanera Mobley was about to give birth. In the hospital, Gloria found herself in Shanera's room, where a vulnerable moment was shared. Shanera's uncertainties about motherhood resonated with Gloria's deep-seated yearning to fulfill her partner's demands for a child. This led Gloria to impersonate a nurse, abduct Kamaya, and create a narrative that would not be questioned by her own family or Charles. Upon returning home with Kamaya, Gloria faced her parents' confusion with a concocted story of an emergency birth in Charleston. Despite the precarious foundation of lies, Gloria managed to fabricate records for Alexis, or Kamaya, and maintain this false reality for 18 years. However, the arrival of Kamaya did not mend the fractures in Gloria's relationship with Charles, contrary to her hopes. The act of abducting Kamaya became a pivotal moment in Gloria's life, not for the reasons she had envisioned, but because it propelled her to leave the abusive relationship with Charles. This decision was not spurred by the expected stabilization a child might have brought, but by a newfound resolve to provide a safer environment for Kamaya. In the years that followed, Gloria rebuilt her life, marrying a supportive and loving husband, and regaining custody of her 2 sons. The long-standing mystery of Kamaya Mobley's disappearance was resolved with the arrest of Gloria Williams on January 13, 2017, from her South Carolina home. The following year, a trial that captured the nation's attention began. On February 12, 2018, Williams, facing the possibility of life imprisonment, entered a guilty plea for kidnapping and interference with custody, accepting a plea deal that capped her sentence at 22 years. The courtroom was a tableau of deep emotion, with Shanera Mobley and Craig Aiken seated prominently behind the prosecution, embodying the pain of years lost. Kamaya, known to the world as Alexis Menigo, positioned herself away from both sides, embodying the complex loyalties that had defined her life. The trial was marked by tears and heartbreak, highlighting the indelible impact of Williams' actions on everyone involved. Kamaya's decision not to testify underscored the no-win situation she found herself in. Despite recognizing Shanera as her birth mother and discovering a family she never knew, her allegiance to Williams, the only mother she had known, remained strong. Williams had provided her with love and a semblance of a normal life, complicating Kamaya's feelings towards her biological parents, who sought justice for the abduction that tore their family apart. Shanera's testimony was a poignant reminder of the joy and hope she felt upon becoming a mother, only to have it snatched away. Craig, too, expressed the enduring pain of never having known his daughter, directing his anguish towards Williams in court. The trial revealed the deep wounds inflicted on both families, exacerbated by the continued bond between Kamaya and Williams, which Shanera viewed as a betrayal. Williams' testimony provided insight into her mindset at the time of the abduction. Describing herself as broken and desperate during that period, she recounted the pressures and abuse that led to her kidnapping Kamaya, hoping to salvage her relationship with her abusive boyfriend. Her apology to Shanera and Craig, while acknowledging the pain she had caused, highlighted the complexity of her emotions and actions. Ultimately, on June 8, 2018, Williams was sentenced to 18 years in prison, a decision that left no one unscathed. Kamaya's struggle with her identity and allegiance, the Mobley family's quest for justice, and Williams' acknowledgement of her wrongdoing painted a picture of profound loss and the search for closure. The trial's aftermath saw Kamaya grappling with her dual identity and the reality of her life's story. Returning to Walterboro and the home where she was raised, she faced the challenge of reconciling her past with her future. The relationships between Kamaya, Shanera, and Williams remained fraught, a testament to the lasting impact of Williams' actions on multiple generations.
So I still lost. It's no winning situation. I don't have a relationship with my child. Right now, speaking at this moment, so I still lost. So what did I gain? Nothing. And honestly, I wish sometimes she would have never came back. That I do wish, because it takes a toll, because I'm a mother first. And it takes a toll on my other children. My daughter's going to the 10th grade. Well, she have to argue with people to defend her mother. She's on Facebook defending my kid, my other babies. They're our babies. They shouldn't have to go out there in that world and experience that stuff. That shouldn't have to be their life. And this is what Gloria and Kamaya brought upon my children. And I truly, really feel deep in my heart, I just wish she wouldn't have never came back. I really do. Because you came back. This woman made a mockery of my life when she took my baby. And not only did you make a mockery when you brought my baby back, but you let her help you make a mockery of my life. And this judge allowed this lady to keep reaching out to my child every day. So she's still committing a crime. And you had the right to stop that, and you did not. So no, I don't have no respect for that judge.
In December of 2018, Kamaya Mobley made a life-altering decision to move to Jacksonville, Florida, to be closer to her biological family, a step that was met with overwhelming joy and public support, as evidenced by her father's proud announcement on Facebook. This move represented not just a change in Kamaya's living situation, but a significant step towards healing and building a relationship with her biological parents. Despite the complexities and emotional turmoil that had characterized their interaction since her discovery and the trial of Gloria Williams. Kamaya's transition to life in Jacksonville was not without its challenges. The emotional strain of navigating relationships with both her biological family and the woman she had always known as her mother, Gloria, continued to be a source of tension and heartache. Shanera Mobley, Kamaya's biological mother, expressed feelings of having to compete with Gloria for Kamaya's affection, highlighting the intricate dynamics at play. At one point, Shanera even questioned whether the reunion had caused more harm than good, given the emotional turmoil that it stirred. Despite these challenges, Kamaya's commitment to forging a path forward was evident in her efforts to integrate into her new environment and the life milestones she achieved. By the age of 21, Kamaya had secured employment, obtained a legal government ID, and acquired her driver's license. Achievements that marked her growing independence and her desire to move forward with her life. Importantly, when it came time to choose a legal name for her ID, Kamaya chose Kamaya Mobley, embracing her birth identity while navigating the complexities of her dual heritage. Kamaya's relationship with Gloria Williams, though complicated by the circumstances of her upbringing, remained a significant part of her life. She continued to visit Gloria in prison, maintaining a connection with the woman who had raised her. This ongoing relationship underscored Kamaya's struggle to balance her affection for Gloria with her growing connections to her biological family. On December 15, 2023, Williams made a significant move in her case by requesting a judge to dismiss her current judgment and sentence, marking her third plea for reconsideration. She claimed her defense was severely lacking, particularly highlighting that her legal team failed to explore her mental health issues, neglected to request a competency hearing, and did not prepare an adequate defense, leaving her with no choice but to accept a plea deal. As a result, Williams criticized her attorneys for not seeking a change of venue to ensure a fair trial. Her motion advocates for the right to retract her plea, undergo a new competency evaluation, and, if deemed competent, to restart the legal process. So what do you think about Williams' current move in the case? And how do you view the challenges faced by Kamaya's biological family in reconnecting with her? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to share your suggestions in the comment section below. For more captivating true crime stories, like, share, and subscribe to Cold Case Files. On December 15, 1984, in Ozaukee County, Wisconsin, a chilling scene unfolded. Dan Siraki, a local resident, was on his way to get his early morning newspaper when he stumbled upon a horrifying sight in his driveway. After nearly 35 years, the resolution of Traci Hammerberg's cold case brought a profound sense of closure to her family. The discovery of Philip Cross as her killer, although posthumously, provided answers to the many questions that had lingered for decades. This closure, while it didn't bring Traci back, offered a degree of solace to her loved ones. Her sister, reflecting on this long-awaited conclusion, shared her thoughts.
I was mad that I did not get to say my piece and that he didn't get punished at all for it.
Ozaukee County deputies finally identifying Cross as the man who killed Hammerberg 35 years ago, thanks to forensic science.
My sister did not get to live her life, but he got to live his.
What are your thoughts on the use of forensic genealogy in solving cold cases? Do you think the detectives could have taken another approach in knowing the perpetrator earlier enough? Let us know your thoughts on the Traci Hammerberg case. If there's a specific case you'd like us to explore, feel free to drop your suggestions in the comment section below. And for more captivating true crime stories, Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps us bring more stories to light.